Hello, welcome to Skull RPG Podcast. My name's Dwight Skull.
My name's Jacob Skull.
And today we're going to teach you how to tell your story.
So the next one on our list is Gurps. And the Gurps is unique because it can allow you to, in a nutshell, do any type of game that you want to do. What Gurps stands for is Generic Universal Role-Playing System. And the unique thing with Gurps is its rule set is so broad, but yet specific with additional books if you so choose. To do like an actual classic D&D, you could do a Western, you could do a mystery. There's almost anything you can do.
Well, and actually looking at the stuff, there's actually Cyberpunk is there. So maybe that's where the Cyberpunk 2077 is from Steve Jackson's GURPS campaign of that.
Possibly.
Anyway, regardless, here's the deal. GURPS is a fantastic system. It can be a lot like D&D. You could play Cyberpunk with it and make it a lot like Shadowrun, which was the last one we covered. You could do a hero. So if you're wondering, how do I do a superhero? You could run GURPS and pick up the superhero book and basically run as, your favorite Marvel or DC-esque comics. You could run a psionic campaign out of the entire thing, which we've done.
Yep.
You could run sci-fi. Literally, it is a generic, universal role-playing system. You can play anything with it.
And the nice advantage with it is, yes, there's other books, but there's enough stuff in the base book that you can run as supers without the supers book.
Yeah, you just might want more stuff.
It just adds more stuff that's specific to supers.
So the only difference, we talked about D&D and we talked about Shadowrun, and those two run off of a very kind of a similar system where you roll a certain character or you get certain numbers to plug into certain attributes. The real difference with GURPS that's different than any of these other role-playing games that we've covered so far is you will be given a set of points. And what do I mean by points? Some of you might be thinking, oh, I know what points are. No. I'll give you, if we're going to play a normal human, you get about 100 points. If you're playing somebody a little bit beefier, you get 150 points. If you're playing something where I think you can actually do a lot of cool stuff, we normally play 250-point characters with up to 125 points worth of flaws. So you get a character with 375 points of really good damage stuff, but they're probably going to be a little schizophrenic, alcoholism, have to have a specific diet, and they might not really have any kind of good social cues.
GURPS is a great example. So, like, using Professor Xavier from the X-Men.
Great example.
The reason why his stuff's so powerful is
he has no legs.
So that's like a 50 to 100 point flaw because he's crippled in a wheelchair.
Yep.
And that allows him to heighten his mental abilities.
Right. So Professor Xavier in a GURPS system, Professor Xavier would look at it and say, oh, well, I really came into my mutant ability much more after my brother, the Juggernaut, dropped a building on my legs and shattered them.
Yep.
Because since I was in this chair all the time, I spent those extra points, basically, and I heightened my telekinesis and my telepathy abilities.
How does Wolverine account for his fast healing? Well, he has amnesia. Which means that the GM has the right to do whatever the GM wants to with his backstory.
Yep. So some random villain shows up he's never seen before. That's okay. He killed his brother 150 years ago, and Wolverine doesn't remember it.
Yeah, so GURPS is a nice system for that because it's generic enough to go, well, you're going to have flaws and you're going to have advantages. So it's just this nice thing.
Well, let's talk about flaws for a second because, if you think about it, D&D doesn't have flaws in their system and Shadowrun doesn't have flaws in their systems either. What are flaws? Well, flaws are real huge character deficits. So amnesia is one of them, or you could have one eye or one leg or no legs, i.e., you're crippled. You could be a quadriplegic and get like 150 points if you wanted. The problem with playing a quadriplegic in like a superhero deal is going to be really complex, and this is why Professor X does all his crap at home.
Another handful that they have is any of your addictions.
Yep.
They also have gambling. They also have dyslexia is one. Having
there's a lot of also mental health issues too, like schizophrenia, multiple personality syndromes, and as more debilitating as they are, the more points they are to you to go spend somewhere else.
Because the concept is these are character flaws.
Yep.
They're part of your character. Batman, for as much as his parents affected him, he has to deal with those, and he has to role play how he feels about that. So does Superman, because one of the flaws Superman could have is he's too charitable.
Right, and that's the thing. So you could have and there are some flaws that actually are quote unquote good flaws, like truth telling is a flaw. It's like a 5-point flaw because
you can't tell truth.
You can't tell lies.
You can't tell lies.
And if you try to tell lies, you have to actually make like a will save to try to tell a lie, and they get bonuses to detect the lie because you're so bad at it.
Caring for somebody, like how some superheroes or even supervillains care about one or two people, is a flaw.
The code of conduct is a flaw. So Superman's not wanting to. So Batman won't kill an innocent. I mean, we'll digress. We won't go into like how he beats the crap out of everybody, but let's say his code is actually intact and he doesn't kill anybody. That not killing a person is a flaw, and it's a point buy. So it allowed him to get like, I don't know, 7 more martial arts because of it. And so what's cool about GURPS system as a whole is because you're spending points, everyone starts with a base of like 10, which sounds very familiar. And if you want to spend and get more than 10 in your intelligence, it's expensive. It's way expensive because it's not something that you can easily do. And so there's some really cool things where it forces you to create a character that's good at maybe one thing and ancillarily good at 2 or 3 other things. But it's impossible just to create a D&D fighter because that doesn't really exist as a concept.
Yeah.
What exists as a concept would be, well, what weapons do you use? Oh, I'm really good at using a broadsword. Perfect. Well, you have skills in the broadsword. Do you want to put strength points in because you're just a weakling? So you need to spend points on making yourself big and buff. So if you want to create like a Conan the Barbarian, it makes sense. Conan can't read. That's a flaw. Conan, might be able to speak several different languages, at least if you read the Conan books, but he can't read. He's not civilized. He doesn't understand civilized culture. That's a flaw. As such, when civilization looks at him, they look down on him. They treat him different. And that's the cool thing I really like about GURPS is when I tell people we're going to play GURPS, I say, okay, don't necessarily think about the character that you're wanting to create. Think about the flaws that you can create because your character should be based more on their flaws than what they can do.
Yep.
Now, those flaws will let you do a bunch of cool stuff, and that's fine. And a lot of these, I would just say, this is where you can create... Let me put it this way. So in D&D, I had a friend, and he was like, I want to create a guy like Riddick. So he tried to do that in D&D, and it didn't really work well because D&D doesn't have the rule set for a Riddick-like character. In GURPS, you could, with the base GURPS, you could easily create a character like Riddick if I gave you enough points. I created a guy who was like Sherlock Holmes, but had psionic abilities for it. My brother-in-law, Matt, who we had on this show earlier, he created like a Nightcrawler type of character who could teleport. And that's totally doable in GURPS. And we weren't even playing the superhero game.
We were playing psionics.
We're playing psionics, which is like mental abilities.
Yep. We're running through a super right now with Matt, and you created a Wolverine-esque character, and I kind of have a Static Shock-esque character.
Right, totally doable with the points we have. Now, that said, like Wolverine's like 600 points, so I created...
The 200-point...
200-point version equivalent of Wolverine, yeah.
Same thing as Static Shock. I'm like playing the 200-point equivalent of Static Shock.
Right, because he's like a 600-point character or something like that.
Even the weak characters in Marvel and DC are like 700 points.
Right, because the idea with GURPS is that it's
based in reality.
It's based in reality.
Which another thing that GURPS has a quick advantage on too is, so let's say that you throw your players into a situation that they don't have the skills for. No problem. It's not that they're out of luck. It's just, if you need to be a car, if you need to repair your car, nobody has a mechanic skill, it's intelligence -4.
Right.
Because everybody has a general knowledge of how to use a car, on how to repair a car. You're just going to take severe penalties at it because you're not trained.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean that you can't figure out how to do it. It's just...
And the same thing is in real life, right? You could pull up a YouTube video and do your own plumbing, but you're not going to be as good as a person who has 1 year in plumbing, and they're not going to be as good as it has 10 years experience being a plumber. It's the same idea. So your skill points could equal, like, yeah, I have 10 years experience in being a plumber. Perfect. You got the points for it. Well, I'm going to dabble with it. That's fine. Just roll a straight intelligence -4 and see what happens. One last thing I want to talk about GURPS is that there is no mat, there is no playing mat, there is no miniatures. I'm sure you could probably work it in. I've just never felt the need to. And so GURPS is a great game that the investment in GURPS is really just the basic set book.
And then 3 dice, 3d6s, because that's what it runs off.
Yep, 3d6.
You don't need to have a whole entire dice set. You can literally raid your Yahtzee board game for that night and grab 3d6.
Yeah, or worst case, you could just, you could raid Monopoly and just take 2 of them and roll 1 again. Yep. I mean, it's really, the cost of entry is almost sitting in your house, minus the PDF for GURPS. And you could pick that up again. I really do highly recommend Drive-Thru RPG if you just want some quick PDFs that you can download for reasonable. The money goes right back to the person that came up with the games, so that's a really nice feature. I'm pretty sure GURPS is on Drive-Thru RPG. If not, you can actually just go to sjgames.com. That's Steve Jackson Games, and he's got literally sjgames.com/GURPS will take you right to their website. It's a fantastic little system. I highly recommend GURPS if you haven't played it yet.
Hey, thanks for listening.
And for more resources, please go to skullrpg.com.